The rain was falling hard on the streets of New Seattle that morning. Marcus Chen stepped out of his black shuttle and felt the cold water hit his face. He pulled his expensive coat tighter around his body and looked up at the gray sky. The shuttle lifted off behind him with a soft hum and disappeared into the clouds. Marcus checked his watch and cursed under his breath. He was late for his meeting with the Galactic Trade Consortium. These aliens did not like it when humans were late. They thought it showed disrespect. Marcus did not care much about what they thought, but he needed this deal to go through. His company depended on it. His stomach growled loud enough to make him stop walking. Marcus had not eaten anything since yesterday afternoon. The meeting was important, but his body was telling him that food was more important right now. He looked around the wet street and saw a food cart on the corner. Steam was rising from it, and the smell of cooked meat reached his nose even through the rain. Marcus made a decision. The meeting could wait 5 more minutes. The vendor was a Krelthian. Marcus could tell by the 4 arms and the gray skin that looked like stone. The alien had been on Earth for maybe 10 years now. Most of the aliens who came to Earth after first contact had learned to run businesses just like humans did. This one sold food from a metal cart with a heating element underneath. The cart had a sign that said fresh grilled meat in both English and Krelthian symbols. Marcus walked up to the cart and pointed at a skewer that looked like chicken. The Krelthian nodded with all 4 of his eyes and reached for it with one of his lower arms. That was when Marcus heard the voice. It was young and scared and desperate. It cut through the sound of the rain and the traffic like a knife. Someone was shouting at him. Marcus turned around and saw a girl running toward him. She could not have been more than 15 years old. Her clothes were old and torn and soaked through with rain. Her dark hair was stuck to her face and her shoes looked like they had holes in them. She was human. Marcus could see that right away. She was one of the many people who had fallen through the cracks when Earth joined the galactic economy. There were thousands of them in every city now. People who could not find work because aliens would do the same job for less money. People who had lost everything. The girl reached Marcus and grabbed his arm with both hands. Her grip was strong and her eyes were wide with fear. She was breathing hard from running. Water dripped from her hair and nose. She looked up at Marcus like he was the most important person in the world. Her voice shook when she spoke. "Please do not eat that," she said. "Please, sir, you have to believe me. Do not eat that food." Marcus stared at her. He looked at the Krelthian vendor and then back at the girl. The vendor made a clicking sound with his mouth that Marcus knew meant he was annoyed. The alien spoke in broken English. "Girl is crazy," he said. "Always making trouble for honest workers. Always trying to scare customers away. You want food or no?" Marcus looked at the skewer in the vendor's hand. It looked fine. It smelled fine. There was no reason to think anything was wrong with it. But something made Marcus pause. Something in the girl's eyes stopped him from taking the food. It was not just fear he saw there. It was not just desperation. It was something else. Something that made his gut twist. Marcus had built his fortune by trusting his instincts. He had made billions of dollars by knowing when to listen to that little voice in his head that told him something was wrong. Right now, that voice was screaming. The girl was still holding his arm. Her hands were shaking. Marcus could feel how cold she was through his coat. She was soaking wet and probably had not eaten in days. She could have been asking him for money. She could have been trying to rob him. But instead, she was warning him about food. Why would a homeless kid who probably needed money more than anything else in the world waste her time warning a rich stranger about street food? It did not make sense. Unless she really believed what she was saying. Unless she really thought the food was dangerous. Marcus made his decision. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his credit chip. He handed it to the Krelthian vendor. "For your trouble," he said. The vendor took the chip and ran it through his scanner. His eyes went wide when he saw the amount Marcus had given him. It was enough to buy 100 skewers. The vendor's attitude changed immediately. He bowed his head and thanked Marcus in Krelthian. Marcus ignored him. He turned to the girl and spoke quietly. "Come with me," he said. "We need to talk." They walked 3 blocks in silence. The girl led the way and Marcus followed. She kept looking over her shoulder like she was afraid someone was watching them. Maybe she was right to be afraid. Marcus did not know yet. They finally stopped at an old parking structure that looked like it had been abandoned for years. The concrete was cracked and covered in graffiti. There were no cars inside. No people either. It was dry, though. That was something. The girl walked inside and turned to face Marcus. Her whole body was tense, like she was ready to run at any second. "My name is Sophie," she said. Her voice was stronger now that they were alone. She was not shouting anymore, but Marcus could still hear the fear underneath her words. "And that food vendor back there is poisoning humans." Marcus felt his blood go cold. He stared at the girl and tried to decide if she was telling the truth or if she was crazy like the vendor had said. "Poisoning," he repeated. "That is a very serious thing to say." "I know," Sophie said. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a device. It looked like someone had built it from spare parts and junk. Wires stuck out of it and the screen was cracked, but when Sophie turned it on, a holographic display appeared in the air between them. "This is a chemical analyzer," Sophie said. "I built it myself from parts I found in dumpsters. It is not perfect, but it works. I have been testing street food all over the city for the past 6 months. Every single vendor that is owned by aliens has the same compound in their food. It is called threnoxine." She pointed at a molecule on the holographic display. It looked complicated, with dozens of atoms connected in a pattern that meant nothing to Marcus. He was a businessman, not a scientist, but Sophie seemed to know what she was talking about. "To most alien species, threnoxine is harmless," Sophie continued. "They use it as a preservative in food. It keeps things fresh for longer. But for humans, it is poison. It builds up in our nervous system over time. Months or years of eating food with this compound in it, and we start to lose our memory. We lose control of our muscles. Eventually, our whole system shuts down and we die. And the thing is, it happens so slowly that nobody connects it to the food. They just think we are getting sick from pollution or stress or something else." Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. He looked at the holographic display and then at Sophie. "How do you know all this?" he asked. Sophie's face changed. She looked younger suddenly and more vulnerable. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "Because my mother was a scientist," she said quietly. "She was a xenobiologist. She studied alien life forms and how they interact with human biology. She was the one who discovered threnoxine in the food. She tried to warn people, but nobody would listen to her. They said she was paranoid. They said she was making it up to get attention. Then one day she died in what the police called an accident. But it was not an accident. Someone killed her to keep her quiet." Sophie wiped her face with the back of her hand. "After Mom died, I had nowhere to go. I ended up on the streets. But I kept her research. I kept her notes and her equipment. And I kept testing food because someone has to know the truth. Someone has to stop this before it is too late." Marcus stared at this 15-year-old girl who had lost everything and was still fighting. He thought about his own daughter, who was safe at home in a mansion with everything she could ever want. He thought about all the humans on Earth who were eating poisoned food and did not even know it. He thought about the billions of dollars he had made and what good it was doing anyone. Then Marcus Chen made the most important decision of his life. He pulled out his communicator and started making calls. "Where are we going?" Sophie asked. She looked confused. "To my lab," Marcus said. "We are going to test everything you have told me. We are going to verify every piece of data. And if you are right, then we are going to stop this. Whatever it takes." The Chen Industries building reached toward the sky like a giant glass needle. It was one of the tallest structures in New Seattle, and from the top floors you could see the ocean on a clear day. Today was not a clear day, though. Rain covered everything and made the city look gray and sad. Marcus brought Sophie through the main entrance and past security without stopping. The guards knew who he was. Everyone in the building knew who he was. He owned the place. Sophie walked beside him with her head down and her wet clothes dripping on the expensive marble floor. People stared at her as they passed. A homeless girl in the lobby of Chen Industries was not something you saw every day. They took a private elevator to the research floors. Sophie did not say anything during the ride up. She just stood there shivering and holding her backpack like it was the most valuable thing in the world. Maybe it was. If what she said was true, then that backpack held evidence of genocide. The elevator doors opened, and Marcus led Sophie down a hallway lined with laboratories. Through the windows, they could see scientists working with equipment that looked like it came from science fiction. Some of it probably did. Half the technology in this building had been bought or traded from alien species. Now Marcus was wondering if that had been a mistake. They stopped at a door marked Xenobiology Research. Marcus pressed his hand against the scanner and the door slid open. Inside was a large laboratory filled with machines and computers and things Sophie did not recognize. A woman looked up from her workstation when they entered. She was tall and thin with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent. When she saw Marcus, she smiled. When she saw Sophie, the smile faded into confusion. "Marcus, this is unexpected," she said. "Who is your friend?" "This is Sophie," Marcus said. "Sophie, this is Dr. Helen Park. She is the best xenobiologist I know." Helen raised an eyebrow at the compliment, but did not say anything. Marcus continued talking. "Helen, I need you to analyze something for me. It is urgent." He gestured to Sophie, who pulled her homemade analyzer out of her backpack. She handed it to Helen carefully, like she was afraid it might break. Helen took the device and turned it over in her hands. Her expression changed from confusion to interest. "Did you build this?" she asked Sophie. Sophie nodded. "From scraps mostly," she said quietly. "It works, though. I have been using it for months." Helen looked at Sophie with new respect. She activated the device and studied the holographic display that appeared. Her eyes moved quickly over the data. After a minute, she looked at Marcus. "What am I looking at?" she asked. Marcus took a deep breath. "A compound called thrinoxine," he said. "According to Sophie, it is in food being sold by alien vendors throughout the city. She says it is harmless to most galactic species but deadly to humans." Helen's face went pale. She looked at the display again and then at Sophie. "Where did you get this information?" she asked. "From my mother," Sophie said. "She was Dr. Patricia Grant. She worked at the University of New Seattle before she died." Helen's eyes widened. "I knew Patricia," she said softly. "We worked together years ago. She was brilliant." Sophie nodded, and Marcus could see tears forming in her eyes again. "She tried to warn people about the thrinoxine," Sophie said. "Nobody believed her." Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to her computer and started typing. "Give me 3 hours," she said. "I will run a complete analysis. If this compound is what you say it is, we will know." Marcus nodded. "Thank you, Helen." He turned to Sophie. "Come on. Let me get you some dry clothes and something to eat." Marcus took Sophie to his private office on the top floor. He called his assistant and asked her to bring clothes and food. Within 20 minutes, Sophie was wearing new jeans and a warm sweater, and eating a sandwich that Marcus had personally verified came from a human-owned restaurant. She ate like she had not seen food in days. She probably had not. Marcus watched her and felt something twist in his chest. This girl had lost everything. Her mother, her home, her future. And instead of giving up, she had spent months trying to warn people about a danger they did not even know existed. She had risked her life to stop a stranger from eating poisoned food. That took courage. That took strength. Marcus was not sure he would have done the same thing in her position. After Sophie finished eating, Marcus asked her to tell him everything. She pulled out a notebook from her backpack. The pages were worn and covered in her mother's handwriting. She had notes on chemical compounds and test results and lists of vendors. Patricia Grant had been thorough. She had documented everything she found. Sophie explained that her mother had discovered thrinoxine by accident while studying alien food imports. She had been doing research on how different species processed nutrients. When she tested samples from various sources, she found the compound in almost everything that came from off-world manufacturers. At first she thought it was a preservative, Sophie said. Something harmless that kept food fresh during the long journey from other planets to Earth. But when she tested it on human cells in the lab, she saw that it caused damage. The cells started to break down. Their ability to communicate with each other was disrupted. She ran more tests and discovered that thrinoxine specifically targeted the human nervous system. It was like it was designed to hurt us. Sophie paused and looked at Marcus. My mother spent 2 years researching this. She tried to publish her findings, but every journal rejected her papers. She tried to go to the government, but they said she needed more evidence. She tried to warn the public, but nobody would listen. They called her crazy. They said she was paranoid about aliens. Some people even said she was racist. Marcus felt anger building in his chest. And then what happened, he asked. Sophie's voice became very quiet. Then one night she died in a car accident. The police said her brakes failed, but my mother was careful about maintaining her car. She checked everything regularly. I think someone tampered with it. I think they killed her because she was getting too close to the truth. After she died, I was alone. I had no other family. Social services tried to put me in a group home, but I ran away. I could not let them stop me from finishing what my mother started. Marcus looked at the notebook in Sophie's hands. He thought about Patricia Grant dying alone in a car accident that was probably not an accident. He thought about Sophie spending months on the streets continuing her mother's work. He thought about all the humans eating poisoned food every day. Then his communicator buzzed. It was Helen. She wanted them back in the lab. Marcus stood up and looked at Sophie. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded and followed him to the elevator. When they entered the laboratory, Helen was standing at her workstation, surrounded by holographic displays. Her face was grim. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He knew that look. It was the look Helen got when she had bad news. She turned to face them, and Marcus could see that her hands were shaking. "It is all true," she said. "Every word. I ran Sophie's samples through our equipment. I also sent teams to collect new samples from vendors across the city. They all came back positive for thrinoxine." Helen pulled up a molecular diagram. "This compound is definitely a preservative. It is used throughout the galaxy in food production, but its effect on humans is catastrophic." Helen manipulated the display to show cellular damage. When thrinoxine enters the human body, it crosses the blood-brain barrier. It accumulates in neural tissue over time. After several months of regular exposure, it begins to interfere with neurotransmitter function. Memory problems start first, then motor control issues. Eventually, the damage becomes irreversible and fatal. And the worst part is that the symptoms develop so slowly that they could be attributed to dozens of other causes. Stress, pollution, natural aging. Nobody would ever suspect food poisoning because the timeline does not match typical foodborne illness. "How widespread is this?" Marcus asked. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Helen pulled up a map of the city. Red dots marked locations where samples had tested positive. There were hundreds of them. "This is just New Seattle," she said. "If the pattern holds across other cities and other planets, then we are looking at a systematic contamination of the entire human food supply. Every product manufactured off-world and imported to Earth or human colonies could contain this compound." Marcus felt like the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. How many people, he started to ask, but could not finish the question. Helen answered anyway. "Based on consumption patterns and population data, potentially billions of humans have been exposed. Many are probably already showing early symptoms without knowing why." Sophie had been quiet during Helen's explanation, but now she spoke up. Her voice was steady despite the tears running down her face. "My mother was right," she said. "They are killing us, all of us, and they are doing it slowly enough that nobody notices." Marcus looked at Sophie and then at Helen. Both of them were looking at him now, waiting for him to make a decision, waiting for him to tell them what to do next. Marcus Chen had built an empire by making smart decisions, by calculating risks and rewards, by knowing when to act and when to wait. But this was different. This was not about money or business. This was about survival. The survival of every human being on Earth and beyond. And there was only one choice he could make. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Marcus set Sophie up in one of his company apartments with everything she needed. New clothes, a real bed, access to food that had been tested and verified as safe. But Sophie did not spend much time in the apartment. She was at the laboratory almost every day, working alongside Helen and the other scientists. She had knowledge about her mother's research that nobody else possessed. She understood the data in ways that even the trained scientists sometimes missed. Helen said that Sophie had a natural gift for xenobiology. Patricia Grant would have been proud. Marcus, meanwhile, was using every resource at his disposal to investigate the thrinoxine contamination. He hired private investigators to trace supply chains. He brought in chemists and biologists from around the world. He spent millions of dollars on equipment and testing. And with each passing day, the picture became clearer and more terrifying. The thrinoxine was not an accident. It was not a mistake or an oversight. It was deliberate. Someone had put it in the food on purpose. Someone wanted humans to die slowly without knowing why. The supply chain investigation revealed something shocking. Every single manufacturer that used thrinoxine in products destined for Earth was owned by or connected to the galactic hegemony. The hegemony was the largest political organization in known space. It controlled trade routes and set regulations for hundreds of planets. When Earth had joined the hegemony 15 years ago, everyone had celebrated. It meant humanity was finally part of the galactic community. It meant access to alien technology and new markets and unlimited opportunities. Nobody had suspected that it also meant death. Marcus called a meeting with his top advisors. They gathered in his private conference room high above the city. Helen was there along with his legal team and his head of security. Sophie sat in the corner taking notes. She had become Marcus's unofficial consultant on everything related to the investigation. Marcus stood at the head of the table and activated a holographic display. It showed a web of connections between companies and governments and alien species. All roads led back to the hegemony. "This is genocide," he said. His voice was calm, but everyone in the room could hear the anger underneath. "They have been systematically poisoning humanity for 15 years, and they have been hiding it behind normal business practices." One of the lawyers spoke up. He was an older man named Gregory who had worked for Marcus for 20 years. "If we go public with this, it will be considered an act of war. The hegemony will deny everything. They will say we are making it up. They will claim we are trying to start a conflict. And they have more military power than Earth has ever had." Marcus looked at Gregory. "So what do you suggest? That we stay quiet? That we let them keep poisoning us?" Gregory shook his head. "I am not saying that. I am just saying we need to be prepared for the consequences. Once we make this accusation, there is no going back." Helen spoke next. "We have more than accusations. We have data, chemical analyses, medical studies, supply chain documentation. Everything we have found points to intentional contamination. The evidence is overwhelming." Another advisor named Karen leaned forward. "But will anyone believe us? The hegemony controls most of the galactic media. They can spin this any way they want. They can make us look like the bad guys." Marcus nodded. "That is why we need to make sure our evidence is bulletproof, and we need to present it in a way that cannot be ignored or dismissed." Sophie cleared her throat. Everyone turned to look at her. She looked nervous but determined. "My mother tried to do this quietly," she said. "She tried to work through official channels. She tried to follow the rules. And they killed her for it. If we try to do this the same way, we will fail. We need to go big. We need to make so much noise that they cannot silence us." Marcus smiled. "What do you have in mind?" Sophie pulled out her tablet and showed them something she had been working on. A plan for a massive public disclosure. Press conferences in every major city simultaneously. Data released to every news organization at once. Free testing kits distributed to humans across the galaxy so they could verify the contamination themselves. It was bold. It was risky. It was exactly what they needed to do. Marcus looked around the table. Everyone was studying Sophie's plan. Finally, Gregory spoke. "This could work. If we do it right, if we coordinate everything perfectly, we can get the truth out before they can stop us." Karen nodded. "We would need help, though. Other corporations, government officials, military leaders. We cannot do this alone." Marcus stood up. "Then we start building a coalition. We find everyone who cares about humanity's survival, and we bring them together. We have 3 weeks until we go public. That gives us time to prepare." Over the next few days, Marcus reached out to people he had never thought he would need to talk to. Rival business leaders, politicians from different countries, military commanders who had always been suspicious of the hegemony. He told them what he had found and showed them the evidence. Some of them did not believe him at first. Some thought he was crazy or paranoid, but Marcus was patient. He showed them the data. He let them run their own tests, and one by one they came around. They saw the truth. They understood what was happening, and they agreed to help. A coalition formed, representatives from 50 different countries, executives from 100 corporations, scientists and doctors and activists. They all came together with one goal: stop the hegemony from killing humanity. They worked in secret, coordinating their efforts through encrypted communications. They gathered evidence and prepared statements and manufactured millions of testing devices based on Sophie's original design. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be timed exactly right. If they made a mistake, if they gave the hegemony warning, then it would all be over. Sophie became a central figure in the coalition. Her knowledge of the Threnix scene and her mother's research made her invaluable. But more than that, her story became a symbol. A homeless girl who had risked everything to save humanity. People responded to that. They were inspired by it. Marcus watched Sophie grow more confident as the days passed. She was no longer the scared kid he had met in the rain. She was becoming a leader, someone people looked up to, someone who gave them hope. Helen finished her comprehensive analysis 2 days before the planned disclosure. She presented it to Marcus and Sophie in the laboratory. The results were worse than they had initially thought. Based on medical records and death certificates, Helen estimated that threnoxine exposure had already killed over 2 million humans. Most of those deaths had been attributed to other causes: Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, unknown neurological disorders. But the pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. And if the contamination continued unchecked, millions more would die. Marcus felt sick when he heard the numbers. 2 million people. 2 million lives lost because of corporate greed and political scheming. 2 million families destroyed. And the hegemony had done it all while pretending to be humanity's ally. He thought about his own family. His daughter, who was safe because she ate food from expensive human-owned restaurants. How many other kids had not been so lucky? How many had died while their parents watched helplessly, not knowing what was killing them? The anger Marcus felt was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was cold and focused and absolutely certain. The night before the disclosure, Marcus could not sleep. He stood in his office looking out at the city below. The lights sparkled in the darkness. Millions of people going about their lives not knowing that tomorrow everything would change. Sophie found him there around midnight. She brought 2 cups of coffee and handed one to him. "Cannot sleep either?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "Tomorrow we declare war on the most powerful organization in the galaxy. How are you supposed to sleep before something like that?" Sophie smiled. "My mother used to say that fear was just your body preparing for action. She said the key was to use that energy instead of letting it paralyze you." Marcus looked at Sophie. "Your mother was a smart woman." Sophie nodded. She was. And she would have been proud of what we are doing. Not just because we are exposing the truth, but because we are doing it the right way. We are not responding with violence. We are not becoming monsters to fight monsters. We are using facts and evidence and the power of people working together. That is what makes us better than them. Marcus felt something shift inside him. Sophie was right. The hegemony had tried to destroy humanity through deception and poison, but humanity was going to fight back with truth and unity. That was the difference between them. They stood together in silence for a while, watching the city. Finally, Sophie spoke again. "What do you think will happen tomorrow?" Marcus considered the question. "Honestly, I do not know. Best case scenario, the evidence is so overwhelming that the hegemony has no choice but to admit what they did. Worst case, they deny everything and we end up in a war we cannot win. But either way, we will have told the truth. We will have given humanity a fighting chance, and that is worth whatever comes next." Sophie nodded. "My mother died for this truth. I am ready to do the same if I have to." Marcus put his hand on her shoulder. "Let us hope it does not." The Chen Industries headquarters was packed with reporters from every major news organization on Earth. Cameras from 100 different networks were pointed at the podium where Marcus stood. Behind him were massive holographic displays showing chemical formulas and supply chain data. Sophie stood to his left wearing a new suit that Marcus had bought her. Helen stood to his right holding a tablet with all their research data. The room buzzed with conversation as reporters speculated about what this emergency press conference might be about. Some thought Marcus was announcing a new product. Others thought he was stepping down as CEO. None of them suspected the truth. At exactly 9 in the morning, Marcus raised his hand and the room fell silent. He looked out at the sea of faces and cameras. This was it. There was no going back now. He took a deep breath and began to speak. 15 years ago, humanity joined the galactic hegemony. We thought we were becoming part of something greater. We thought we were joining a community of civilized species working together for mutual benefit. Today, I am here to tell you that we were wrong. The room erupted immediately. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Marcus held up his hand again and waited for quiet. For the past 15 years, Marcus continued, the hegemony has been systematically poisoning humanity. A chemical compound called threnoxine has been deliberately added to our food supply. This compound is harmless to most galactic species. But to humans, it is deadly. It accumulates in our nervous system, causing memory loss, motor control problems, and eventually death. The effects are slow, taking years to manifest. But make no mistake, this is genocide. The room exploded again. This time Marcus could not quiet them. Alien reporters looked shocked. Human reporters looked furious. Everyone was shouting at once. Marcus waited for a full minute before continuing. I know this sounds impossible, Marcus said. I know it sounds like a conspiracy theory. But we have proof. Behind him, the holographic displays came to life, showing charts and graphs and molecular structures. We have tested hundreds of food products from across the planet. Every single item manufactured off-world contains thranoxine. We have traced the supply chain and it leads directly to hegemony-controlled corporations. We have medical evidence showing neurological damage consistent with thranoxine exposure in millions of humans. This is not speculation. This is fact. And today we are releasing all of our data to the public so you can verify it yourselves. Marcus gestured to Sophie. This young woman discovered the contamination when everyone else dismissed it. Her mother, Dr. Patricia Grant, was a xenobiologist who first identified thranoxine in our food supply. She tried to warn us. She tried to publish her research and go to the authorities. But she was ignored. Then she died in what was called an accident. Her daughter continued her work. She spent months on the streets testing food and gathering evidence. She saved my life when she stopped me from eating contaminated food, and now she is helping us save humanity. Sophie looked uncomfortable with all the attention, but she stood straight and met the cameras without flinching. Marcus held up a small device about the size of a credit chip. This is a thranoxine detector. Starting today, Chen Industries will manufacture these by the billions. We will distribute them for free to every human on Earth and throughout the colonies. You will be able to test your food, your water, everything you consume. You will see the truth for yourselves. We are also releasing the design specifications so anyone can manufacture these devices. We want the truth to spread as fast as possible. A reporter in the front row stood up. He was a tall alien with purple skin and 4 eyes. A Vexian. He worked for the Hegemony News Network. These are serious accusations, he said. His voice was calm, but Marcus could hear the threat underneath. Do you have any proof that this contamination was intentional? Perhaps it was simply an oversight in manufacturing. Marcus looked directly at the Vexian reporter. An oversight that appears in every single product manufactured for human consumption. An oversight that has been ongoing for 15 years. An oversight that has killed over 2 million humans. That is not an oversight. That is genocide. The room erupted again. Human reporters were shouting angry questions at the Vexian. The alien reporter tried to speak, but his voice was drowned out. Marcus continued over the noise. We have supply chain records showing that thranoxine was specifically added to products destined for Earth and human colonies. We have internal documents from hegemony corporations discussing the compound's effects on humans. We have everything we need to prove this was intentional, and all of that evidence is now being released to every media outlet simultaneously. Helen stepped forward and began explaining the technical details. She showed brain scans of humans who had died from what doctors thought was Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. She showed how the damage patterns matched thranoxine exposure perfectly. She explained the biochemistry in terms that even non-scientists could understand. By the time she finished, even the most skeptical reporters looked convinced. This was real. This was happening, and humanity had been under attack for 15 years without knowing it. The press conference lasted 3 hours. Marcus and his team answered every question they could. They provided documentation and data and expert testimony. When it finally ended, reporters rushed out to file their stories. Within minutes, the news was spreading across Earth. Within an hour, it had reached the colonies. Within 2 hours, it was being discussed on every human settlement in the galaxy. And everywhere the reaction was the same. Shock, horror, rage. Humanity had been betrayed by the organization they thought was their ally. And now they wanted answers. The hegemony's initial response was predictable. They denied everything. Their official spokesperson appeared on galactic news channels within hours of Marcus's press conference. She was an elegant-looking alien from a species Marcus did not recognize. She spoke in a calm, measured tone that was clearly meant to make Marcus look hysterical by comparison. The hegemony categorically denies these baseless accusations, she said. Thranoxine is a common food preservative used throughout the galaxy. There is no evidence that it causes harm to humans. We believe this is an unfortunate misunderstanding based on flawed research. We call on humanity to remain calm and not let fear and paranoia damage our relationship. But the denial did not work. Too many people had already started testing their food with the detectors Marcus had distributed. Too many were finding thranoxine in products they had been eating for years. Too many families were connecting the dots, realizing that their loved ones had died from poison, not natural causes. The anger spread like wildfire. Within days, human governments were demanding investigations. Trade agreements were being suspended. Embassies were closing. For the first time since first contact, humanity was united, and it was united in fury. The hegemony tried different tactics. They offered to remove thranoxine from all products immediately. They promised investigations and compensation. They sent diplomats to Earth to negotiate. But it was too late. The trust was broken. Humanity had seen the evidence. They knew they had been targeted for extermination. And they were not going to forgive that easily. Marcus watched the developments from his office. Sophie sat across from him, monitoring news feeds from around the galaxy. "It is working," she said quietly. "People believe us. They are taking action." But Marcus did not feel victorious. He felt tired and sad. 2 million people are dead, he said. 2 million lives that we cannot bring back. No amount of justice will fix that, Sophie nodded. "I know, but we can make sure it does not happen to anyone else. We can make sure my mother's death meant something." Marcus looked at her. "When did you get so wise?" Sophie smiled slightly. "I had a good teacher. My mother taught me that the truth matters, even when it is hard, even when it is dangerous. You just have to be brave enough to speak it." Marcus felt a surge of pride. Sophie had come so far in just a few weeks. She was no longer the scared homeless girl he had met in the rain. She was a force to be reckoned with. That evening, something unexpected happened. An alien ambassador requested a private meeting with Marcus, not from the hegemony but from a species called the Dorvani. They were a small civilization that had been part of the hegemony for centuries. The ambassador was an older female with silver skin and wise eyes. She met Marcus in a secure room with only Sophie and Helen present. "Ambassador Chen," she said in perfect English, "I come with information that may be valuable to you." Marcus gestured for her to continue. The ambassador took a deep breath. "The Thranoxin contamination is not unique to humanity. The hegemony has used similar tactics against other species for generations." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean?" The ambassador pulled out a data crystal. "My people have suspected for years that the hegemony was limiting our population growth through artificial means. We could never prove it, but after seeing your evidence, we started testing our own food supply. We found different compounds but with similar effects. Chemicals that reduce fertility, substances that cause chronic illness. The hegemony has been quietly managing the galactic population for centuries, keeping certain species weak and dependent, preventing anyone from becoming strong enough to challenge their control. You humans did something none of us could do. You exposed them." Within 2 weeks of the press conference, 6 alien species had publicly withdrawn from the hegemony. The Dorvani were first, followed by the Telrani, the Corvash, and 3 others whose names Marcus struggled to pronounce. Each species had tested their food supplies and found evidence of tampering. Each had discovered that the hegemony had been slowly poisoning or weakening them for generations. The exodus was unprecedented in galactic history. The hegemony had existed for over 3,000 years and no member species had ever left. Now they were leaving in droves, and it was all because humanity had been brave enough to speak the truth. The hegemony's response shifted from denial to justification. 3 weeks after Marcus's press conference, the High Council made an official statement. They appeared on every news network in the galaxy. 7 ancient beings representing the most powerful species in the hegemony. Their spokesperson was Ambassador Veltoth, a Korthian with 3 mouths that moved in disturbing synchronization. He spoke in a voice that was meant to sound reasonable and calm but came across as condescending. "The younger species must understand," he said, "that the galaxy is a dangerous place. Throughout history we have seen what happens when aggressive expansionist species are allowed to spread unchecked. They conquer. They destroy. They bring chaos." Veltoth continued his speech while images of ancient wars played behind him. "The hegemony was created to prevent such catastrophes. We maintain order. We ensure stability. Sometimes that requires difficult decisions. The population management protocols you call poisoning were implemented to protect the galaxy from species that showed dangerous tendencies. Humanity in particular has demonstrated extreme violence and aggression throughout its short history. Your wars, your weapons, your refusal to accept authority, these are warning signs. The protocols were a preventative measure, nothing more. A way to ensure that dangerous species could not threaten galactic peace." Marcus watched the broadcast from his office with Sophie and Helen. He felt rage building in his chest. "They are admitting it," Sophie whispered. "They are actually admitting to genocide and acting like it was justified." Helen shook her head in disbelief. "They think they are the good guys. They genuinely believe they had the right to decide which species lives and which dies." Marcus clenched his fists. "They made a mistake," he said quietly. "They thought we would accept this explanation. They thought we would understand their logic. But they do not know humans very well. We do not accept oppression. We do not bow to authority just because it claims to be protecting us, and we definitely do not forgive genocide. The galactic reaction to the hegemony's admission was swift and brutal. Public opinion turned against them almost overnight. Even species that were still members of the hegemony began questioning their leadership. How many other population management protocols were in place? How many other species were being secretly controlled or eliminated? The trust that had held the hegemony together for millennia was shattered. Within a month, 12 species had withdrawn. Within 2 months, it was 20. The hegemony was fracturing, and there seemed to be no way to stop it. Marcus found himself in an unexpected position. He had started this to save humanity, but now he was leading a galactic revolution. Representatives from dozens of species were contacting him asking for advice and support. He set up a secure communication network connecting all the species that had left the hegemony. They called it the Free Coalition. The name was Sophie's idea. She said it represented what they were all fighting for: freedom from control, freedom from fear, freedom to determine their own futures. The coalition held its first meeting in New Seattle. Marcus insisted it be on Earth. He wanted everyone to see humanity's world. He wanted them to understand what they were fighting for. The meeting took place in a large conference center that had been built for galactic trade summits. Representatives from 23 species attended. Some came in person, others appeared as holograms. The diversity was stunning. Beings of every size and shape and color. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others required special atmospheric suits. Some communicated verbally. Others used telepathy or sign language or chemical signals. But they all had one thing in common. They were all tired of being controlled. They all wanted something better. Marcus opened the meeting with a simple statement. We are not here to replace one authority with another. We are here to create something new. A galaxy where every species has a voice, where decisions are made through cooperation, not domination, where no one has the power to decide who lives and who dies. The Dorvani ambassador spoke next. She proposed a structure for the coalition, a council where every member species had equal representation. Decisions would require majority agreement. No single species could veto the others. Trade would be based on mutual benefit, not exploitation. Military forces would be defensive, only meant to protect members, not conquer others. It was idealistic. It was probably impossible. But everyone in that room wanted to try. They voted unanimously to adopt the proposal. The Free Coalition was officially born, and for the first time in galactic history, there was an alternative to the hegemony. The hegemony did not take this well. They issued threats. They warned that the coalition would collapse into chaos and war. They imposed trade sanctions on any species that joined. They sent warships to patrol the borders of their territory. Everyone expected war. Military commanders on both sides prepared for inevitable conflict. Earth's defense forces went on high alert. Colony ships were recalled. Civilian populations were evacuated from border regions. Sophie asked Marcus one night if he thought the war would really happen. Marcus looked at the tactical displays showing hegemony fleet movements. Honestly, I do not know, he said. But we have to be ready. We have to show them that we will not back down. But then something unexpected happened. The war never came. Instead, something more powerful began to work. Economics. The hegemony's economy was built on trade between member species. With so many species withdrawing, trade routes collapsed. Resources became scarce. The species that remained in the hegemony suddenly found themselves struggling. The hegemony had always controlled the flow of goods and services. They had made themselves essential. But now that people had an alternative, they realized they did not need the hegemony as much as they thought. The coalition members began trading directly with each other. They shared technology and resources. They helped each other develop new industries. And they did it all without the hegemony taking a cut. Humanity played a crucial role in this new economy. Having been forced to be self-sufficient during their years of hidden persecution, they had developed technologies and methods that other species lacked. Earth's industries boomed as they provided goods and services to coalition members. Human engineers helped other species build their own manufacturing facilities. Human scientists shared research freely. Human merchants established new trade routes. It was everything the hegemony feared. Humans were not conquering through military force. They were succeeding through cooperation and innovation, and they were helping everyone else succeed too. Marcus found his days filled with negotiations and trade agreements instead of war planning. He was building partnerships rather than armies. It was exhausting but satisfying in a way that making money had never been. He was helping create something that would last beyond his lifetime, something that would benefit generations to come. Sophie was by his side through all of it. Marcus had officially adopted her 6 weeks after the press conference. She was his daughter now in every way that mattered, and she had become an invaluable advisor. Her unique perspective as someone who had lived on the streets gave her insights that Marcus's privileged background could never provide. She made sure that in this new order they were building, nobody got left behind. One evening, Marcus and Sophie stood on the observation deck of his headquarters, looking out at the city. New Seattle looked different now. There were more aliens on the streets. Not hegemony officials, but regular people from coalition species who had come to Earth to live and work. They walked alongside humans as equals. They shopped in the same stores and ate in the same restaurants, and their children played together in the parks. "This is what my mother dreamed of," Sophie said quietly. "Not just exposing the truth, but building something better from the ashes." Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. "She would be so proud of you. You took her research and turned it into a movement that is changing the galaxy." Sophie shook her head. "We all did this together. You and Helen and the coalition members and every human who refused to give up. That is what makes us strong. Not any one person, but all of us working together." Marcus smiled. "When did you get so wise?" Sophie laughed. "I learned from the best. You showed me that having money and power does not mean much unless you use it to help people. You could have ignored me that day in the rain. You could have eaten the food and walked away. But you listened. You believed me when nobody else would. That changed everything." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. "I'm glad I listened. You saved more than just my life that day, Sophie. You saved all of us." Sophie leaned against him, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights sparkle below. 6 months after the initial press conference, the Free Coalition had grown to include 37 species. What had started as a desperate attempt to expose genocide had become the foundation for a new galactic order. The Coalition's headquarters was established on Earth in New Seattle. The building was designed by architects from 12 different species, each contributing their unique aesthetic. The result was unlike anything anyone had seen before. A structure that was simultaneously alien and welcoming. A symbol of what could be achieved when different peoples worked together. Marcus stood in the main assembly hall watching workers put the finishing touches on the chamber. In 2 days, they would hold their first official session here. Representatives from all member species would gather to vote on the coalition charter. It would be historic. Sophie found him standing there. She was 17 now and had grown taller. She wore a formal suit and carried herself with confidence that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. "The assembly hall looks amazing," she said. Marcus nodded. "It does. But I keep wondering if we are really ready for this. If we can make this work." Sophie smiled. "We will figure it out. That is what we do, right? We face impossible situations and find a way through." Marcus laughed. "When did you become the optimist?" Sophie walked over to stand beside him. "I learned it from watching you. You could have given up 100 times over the past 6 months, but you kept pushing forward. You kept believing we could build something better." "That is not optimism," Marcus said. "That is stubbornness." Sophie shrugged. "Maybe. But sometimes stubborn hope is exactly what the galaxy needs." The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Security teams swept the building. Diplomatic protocols were reviewed and revised. Translators tested their equipment to ensure every species could understand each other. Media organizations from across the galaxy set up cameras and broadcast equipment. This assembly would be watched by billions of beings. It had to go perfectly. Marcus barely slept. He kept going over his opening speech in his mind. He had written and rewritten it dozens of times. Nothing seemed right. How do you capture the magnitude of what they were attempting? How do you inspire people to believe in something that had never been done before? On the morning of the assembly, Marcus was putting on his suit when Sophie knocked on his door. She came in carrying a data pad. "I have something for you," she said. She handed him the pad. On the screen was a video. It showed Patricia Grant, Sophie's mother, speaking at a university lecture years before she died. Marcus watched as the brilliant scientist explained her research and her hopes for humanity's future among the stars. At the end of the lecture, a student asked her what she thought was humanity's greatest strength. Patricia smiled and thought for a moment before answering. Our greatest strength is that we never stop caring. We see injustice, and we cannot ignore it. We see suffering, and we have to help. Other species might be smarter or stronger or more advanced, but humans care, and that makes all the difference. The video ended. Marcus looked at Sophie and saw tears in her eyes. She was right, Sophie said quietly. That is what all of this is really about. Not politics or economics or military power. It is about caring enough to fight for something better. Marcus felt something click into place in his mind. He suddenly knew exactly what he needed to say at the assembly. Thank you, he told Sophie. This is exactly what I needed to see. Sophie hugged him. Good luck, Dad. Make Mom proud. Marcus held her tight. I will do my best. The assembly hall was packed when Marcus entered. Representatives from 37 species sat in a circular arrangement with no head table. Everyone was equal here. That had been one of the foundational principles. The galleries above were filled with observers and media. Marcus walked to the speaker's platform in the center of the circle. Cameras from 1,000 news organizations focused on him. He took a deep breath and began to speak. 2 years ago, he said, a young girl stopped me on a street and warned me not to eat contaminated food. She had every reason to ignore me. I was rich and powerful. She was homeless and desperate. By any logical calculation, she should have been worrying about her own survival, not mine. But she stopped me anyway. Because that is what humans do. We care about each other even when it makes no sense. Even when it costs us everything. Marcus paused and looked around the chamber. That moment changed my life. It set off a chain of events that brought all of us here today. But it also taught me something important. The galaxy we are trying to build cannot be based on power or control or fear. It has to be based on something better. It has to be based on the simple idea that we care about each other's survival and well-being. Not just our own species, but all species. The hegemony failed because they thought some lives mattered more than others. They thought they had the right to decide who lived and who died. We are here to prove them wrong. We are here to build a galaxy where every species has value, where everyone has a voice, where we protect each other instead of exploiting each other. The representatives listened in silence. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment. Everything they had worked for came down to this. I am not going to pretend this will be easy, he continued. We are 37 species with different cultures and values and needs. We will disagree. We will struggle. There will be times when we wonder if this whole experiment was a mistake. But I believe we can make this work. Not because we are perfect, but because we care. Because we have all suffered under the hegemony's control, and we know there has to be something better. Because we are willing to fight for that better future, even when the odds seem impossible. That is our strength. Not any one species, but all of us together. That is what will make the Free Coalition succeed where the hegemony failed. Marcus finished his speech and returned to his seat. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then the Dorvani ambassador stood. She was an elderly female who had been one of the first to join the coalition. She spoke in a voice that carried throughout the hall. Ambassador Chen speaks truth. The hegemony ruled through fear and control. But fear is exhausting. Control requires constant vigilance. What Ambassador Chen offers is something different. Trust, cooperation, mutual support. These things are sustainable. These things can last for generations. I vote to adopt the coalition charter as proposed. One by one, the other representatives stood and cast their votes. Each species had one vote regardless of size or power. It took 2 hours, but in the end the result was unanimous. 37 votes in favor, 0 against. The charter was adopted. The Free Coalition was officially established. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Representatives from different species embraced or performed their cultural equivalents. Music from a dozen worlds played simultaneously, creating a strange but beautiful harmony. Food was shared, drinks were poured, and for a few hours the weight of their responsibilities was forgotten. They had done something impossible. They had created a new political order based on cooperation instead of domination. Whether it would survive remained to be seen, but tonight they could celebrate the possibility. Marcus found Sophie in the crowd. She was talking to a group of young aliens her own age, children of diplomats and officials who had grown up in the shadow of the hegemony. They were laughing together, sharing stories. Sophie saw Marcus watching and waved him over. "This is my father," she said proudly. "He is the one who started all of this." The young aliens looked at Marcus with admiration. One of them, a Telrani boy with blue fur, spoke up. "My parents say you saved the galaxy." Marcus shook his head. "I did not save anything. Your parents and their leaders did that. And Sophie here. She is the real hero. She was brave enough to speak the truth when everyone else was silent." Sophie blushed, but Marcus could see she was pleased. The young aliens started asking questions about what happened that day in the rain. Sophie told the story with dramatic flair, making them laugh and gasp at all the right moments. Marcus stepped back and watched. This was the future they were fighting for, a generation that had never known the hegemony's control. Young people who would grow up believing that cooperation between species was normal, that diversity was strength, that everyone deserved respect and dignity regardless of what planet they came from. If they could protect that, if they could build a galaxy where these kids could thrive, then everything they had gone through would be worth it. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, Marcus stood alone on the observation deck of the Coalition building. The city stretched out below him. Lights from homes and businesses and vehicles created a glowing tapestry. Somewhere down there, people were going about their lives. Working, eating, sleeping, loving, living. Most of them did not know about the assembly today. Most did not understand how close humanity had come to extinction. And that was okay. Marcus had not done this for recognition or glory. He had done it because it was right. Because when someone asked for help, you helped them. Because when you saw injustice, you fought it. Because that was what it meant to be human. Helen joined him on the deck. She looked tired but happy. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." Marcus nodded. "Phase 1 at least, now comes the hard part, making it work." Helen laughed. 3 years after that rainy day when Sophie had stopped Marcus from eating poisoned food, the galaxy looked completely different. The Free Coalition now included 52 species. The hegemony still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Only 12 species remained as members, and even those were constantly debating whether to stay or leave. The mighty empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia had been brought down not by weapons or war, but by the simple act of speaking truth. Marcus often thought about how strange that was, how something so small had become something so big. One girl warning one man about poisoned food had reshaped galactic civilization. The Coalition headquarters in New Seattle had become one of the busiest places in the galaxy. Every day ships arrived bringing diplomats and traders and tourists. The city had transformed from a rainy industrial center into a cosmopolitan hub where dozens of species mixed freely. Human children played with alien children in the parks. Restaurants served food from 100 different worlds. Schools taught students in 20 different languages. It was chaotic and messy and wonderful. Sophie walked through the city streets on her way to the Coalition building. She was 19 now, and had just finished her degree in xenobiology from the University of New Seattle. She had graduated top of her class. Her professors said she had an intuitive understanding of alien biochemistry that was rare even among experienced scientists. Sophie knew where that understanding came from. Her mother. Every time she looked through a microscope or analyzed a chemical compound, she felt Patricia's presence guiding her. Today was important. The Coalition Council was voting on whether to accept 3 new member species. It should have been routine, but nothing in galactic politics was ever simple. 2 of the species were small civilizations that had left the hegemony months ago. But the third was different. The Corthians. They were one of the founding species of the hegemony. They had been part of the High Council that had ordered the genocide of humanity and other races. Now they wanted to join the coalition. The debate had been fierce. Many representatives argued that the Corthians could not be trusted, that they were trying to infiltrate the coalition to destroy it from within. Others argued that the coalition's principles required them to accept anyone who renounced the hegemony's ways. Sophie did not know what to think. Part of her wanted revenge. These were the beings who had killed her mother. But another part of her remembered what Marcus had taught her, that hatred only bred more hatred, that forgiveness was sometimes the bravest choice. She entered the coalition building and made her way to the council chamber. The vote would happen in an hour. She found Marcus in his office reviewing documents. He looked older than he had 3 years ago. Gray had appeared in his hair and lines had formed around his eyes. The weight of leadership had aged him, but he still had that same determined expression that Sophie remembered from their first meeting. "Dad," she said. He looked up and smiled. "Sophie, I was hoping you would come." She sat down across from him. "Have you decided how you are going to vote?" Marcus sighed. "I have been wrestling with that question for weeks. The Corthians committed terrible crimes. They admitted to genocide and tried to justify it. Every instinct I have says we should reject them. But if we do that, what does it say about us? That we are no better than the hegemony? That we only accept people who have never made mistakes?" Sophie nodded slowly. "I have been thinking about it too. About what Mom would want. And I think she would want us to give them a chance. Not because they deserve it, but because we deserve to be better than our worst impulses." Marcus looked at his daughter with pride. "When did you get so wise?" Sophie smiled. "I had good teachers. Both of them." Marcus stood up and walked to the window. "The Corthian delegation is downstairs. They asked to speak to me before the vote. I told them I would meet them. Do you want to come?" Sophie felt her heart race. Face to face with the species that had killed her mother. Could she do that? Could she look them in the eyes and not hate them? She took a deep breath. "Yes, I want to come." The meeting room was small and private. 3 Corthians waited there. Their 3 mouths and multiple eyes made them look alien and unsettling, but their body language showed nervousness. They were afraid. The lead Corthian spoke first. "Ambassador Chen, Miss Grant, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We know this is difficult." Marcus gestured for them to sit. They all settled around a table. The Corthian continued. "We come to you with shame and regret. Our species participated in great evil. We told ourselves it was necessary, that we were protecting the galaxy. But we were wrong. We see that now. The exposure of the genocide opened our eyes to the truth about the hegemony, about ourselves. Many of our people chose to remain with the hegemony, but others like us believe we must change. We must do better. That is why we wish to join the coalition." Sophie spoke before she could stop herself. "You killed my mother." The Corthians looked at her. One of them spoke. "We know. We have read your story. We cannot undo what was done. We cannot bring her back. But we want to honor her memory by building the kind of galaxy she dreamed of. One where such crimes are impossible. Where every life is valued. We know we do not deserve forgiveness. We ask only for a chance to prove we have changed." Sophie felt tears burning in her eyes. She wanted to hate them. She wanted to scream at them for what they had taken from her. But she also saw genuine remorse in their eyes. These were not the arrogant beings who had sat on the High Council. These were people who had realized they were wrong and were trying to make amends. Marcus spoke carefully. "If the coalition accepts your membership, it will come with conditions. Full transparency about your past actions. Cooperation with investigations into hegemony crimes. And you will need to accept that many of us will not trust you for a very long time. Trust is earned, not given." The lead Corthian nodded. "We understand. We accept these conditions. We want to earn your trust. We know it will take time, perhaps a generation or more. But we are committed to this path." Marcus looked at Sophie. She was the one who had suffered most from Corthian actions. If anyone had the right to reject them, it was her. "What do you think, Sophie?" She thought about her mother. About Patricia's belief that every species deserved a chance to be better. About the lectures where she had spoken of hope and cooperation. Sophie took a deep breath. "I think we should vote to accept them. Not because they deserve it, but because that is what makes us different from the hegemony. We believe people can change. We believe in redemption. If we reject that belief, then we become what we fought against." The council chamber was packed when the vote began. Representatives from 52 species sat in their designated seats. The Corthian delegation sat in the visitors' gallery watching nervously. Marcus stood to cast humanity's vote. He looked around the chamber at all the different faces and forms. This was what they had built. A place where everyone had a voice, where decisions were made together. He thought about the journey that had brought them here. Sophie's warning, the investigation, the press conference, the coalition. Every step had been difficult. Every step had required courage and faith. Now they faced another test. Could they extend forgiveness to their former enemies? Could they live up to the principles they claimed to hold? Marcus spoke clearly so everyone could hear. Humanity votes to accept the Corthian application for membership, but we do so with conditions and with our eyes open. This is not about forgetting the past. It is about choosing what kind of future we want to build. One by one, the other representatives cast their votes. Some voted yes immediately. Others hesitated, debating amongst themselves. Some voted no, unable to forgive the Corthians for their role in the genocide. Sophie watched from the observation deck, holding her breath. When the final vote was tallied, the result was 38 in favor, 14 against. The Corthians were accepted. They would join the Free Coalition. Sophie felt conflicting emotions: relief, sadness, hope, fear. But mostly she felt like something had shifted. A cycle of hatred had been broken. Not erased because the pain of what had been done could never be erased, but broken, given a chance to heal. After the vote, Marcus found Sophie outside the building. She was sitting on a bench looking up at the stars. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I think so. It was hard, voting to accept them, but I think Mom would have approved." Marcus sat beside her. "She definitely would have. Your mother believed in the best of people even when they disappointed her. That is why her death was such a tragedy. The galaxy needs more people like her." Sophie smiled through tears. "We have you, and we have everyone in the coalition who chooses hope over hatred every day. That is Mom's legacy. Not just exposing the truth, but inspiring people to be better." They sat together in silence, watching ships come and go from the spaceport. Each ship carried people with their own stories and struggles and hopes. The galaxy was vast and complicated and messy, but it was also beautiful. Marcus thought about how far they had come in 3 years. From a rainy street corner to a functioning coalition of 53 species, from genocide to cooperation, from hatred to forgiveness. It was not perfect. There were still problems, still conflicts, still species that refused to join or trust them. 5 years had passed since that rainy morning when a homeless girl had changed the galaxy. Sophie Chen stood at the podium in the Grand Assembly Hall, looking out at representatives from 67 species. She was 21 years old now, and about to give the most important speech of her life. The hall was enormous, built to accommodate the growing coalition. Sunlight streamed through windows designed by architects from 15 different worlds. The chamber was both alien and familiar, a perfect representation of what the coalition had become. Sophie wore a formal suit that Marcus had insisted she buy for the occasion. She felt nervous but also excited. This was what her mother had dreamed of. Different species coming together not in conflict, but in cooperation. The topic of today's assembly was education, specifically how to teach young people from different species to understand and respect each other. It was a critical issue. The first generation of children born after the coalition's founding were growing up now. They attended schools where half their classmates might be from different planets. They played games invented on worlds their parents had never heard of. They were the future. And if the coalition was going to survive, they needed to be prepared for it. Sophie had spent the last year researching educational systems across member species. She had visited schools on 30 different worlds. She had talked to teachers and students and parents. What she had found was both encouraging and concerning. She began her speech. "Honored representatives, thank you for giving me this opportunity to address you. 5 years ago, I was a homeless teenager living on the streets. Today, I stand before you as a citizen of the Free Coalition. My journey from there to here was made possible by people who believed in me, who saw potential where others saw only problems. That is what I want to talk to you about today. Potential, specifically the potential of our children." The audience listened attentively. Some took notes. Others activated translation devices. Sophie continued. I have spent the past year visiting schools across coalition space. I have seen human children learning to speak Dorvani. I have seen Telrani children playing football with their human classmates. I have seen Korthian and human teenagers working together on science projects. This is the future we fought for. This is what makes all our struggles worthwhile. But Sophie said, her voice becoming more serious, I have also seen problems. Children who are taught by their parents to fear or hate other species. Schools that segregate students by race because it is easier than integration. Teachers who do not have the training or resources to handle diverse classrooms. We are building a new galaxy, but if we do not invest in education, we will fail. Our children need to learn more than just facts and figures. They need to learn empathy. They need to understand that beings who look different or think different are still worthy of respect. That is not something that happens automatically. We have to teach it. A representative from a species called the Varine stood up. With respect, Miss Chen, how do you propose we do this? Our cultures are very different. What works for humans might not work for my people. Sophie nodded. You are absolutely right. That is why I am not proposing a single solution. Instead, I am proposing a framework, a set of principles that each species can adapt to their own culture. First, every child in coalition space should learn at least one language besides their own. Second, every school should include history lessons about the hegemony and why the coalition was formed. Our children need to understand what we are protecting them from. Third, we should establish exchange programs where students can spend time on other worlds learning how different species live. And finally, we should create a coalition-wide curriculum for teaching empathy and cooperation. Not telling children what to think, but giving them tools to understand perspectives different from their own. Another representative spoke up. This is a Korthian female who had been part of the delegation that joined 3 years ago. Miss Chen, I want to support this proposal, but I must ask, will human children be taught to forgive Korthians for what we did, or will they be taught to hate us? This is a concern for my people. Sophie looked at the Korthian representative. She remembered the anger she had felt when the Korthians joined, the pain of knowing these were the beings responsible for her mother's death. But she had chosen forgiveness. She had chosen to believe people could change. They will be taught the truth, she said, that the Korthians participated in genocide, that your species made terrible choices, but they will also be taught that you recognized those mistakes and chose to change, that some Korthians fought against the hegemony's policies. That redemption is possible. Truth and forgiveness are not opposites. We can acknowledge the past without being trapped by it. The Korthian representative sat down looking relieved. Sophie continued her presentation showing data and examples from schools she had visited. She talked about success stories and challenges. She answered questions and addressed concerns. By the time she finished, 2 hours had passed. The representatives voted on her proposal. 65 voted in favor. 2 abstained. 0 voted against. The education initiative was approved. Sophie felt a wave of relief and pride. This was her first major contribution to the coalition. Her mother's work had exposed the genocide. Marcus's work had built the coalition. Now Sophie was helping shape its future. She was carrying on her mother's legacy in her own way. After the assembly, Marcus found Sophie in the observation lounge. She was looking out at the city below, lost in thought. He sat beside her. You did great in there. Sophie smiled. Thanks. I was terrified. Marcus laughed. You did not show it. You sounded confident and knowledgeable, just like your mother when she gave lectures. Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. Do you think she would be proud of what I have become, what we have built? Marcus put his arm around her. She would be beyond proud. You took the truth she discovered and turned it into a movement that changed the galaxy. You did not let her death be meaningless. You honored her by finishing what she started. And you did it with grace and compassion. Those are rare qualities, Sophie. Never underestimate their value. They sat together watching the sunset. The sky turned orange and purple and red. Ships came and went from the spaceport, their lights twinkling like stars. Sophie thought about how far she had come. From a scared kid on the streets to an advisor to the Coalition Council. From having nothing to having a father and a home and a purpose. From despair to hope. It all started with that moment in the rain. When she had seen Marcus about to eat poisoned food and could not stay silent, could not walk away, could not let another person suffer if she could prevent it. That choice had changed everything, not just for her but for billions of beings across the galaxy. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked. Sophie considered the question. "I am thinking about how small actions can have big consequences, how one moment of courage or kindness can ripple outward in ways you never expect. If I had stayed quiet that day, you would have eaten the food. You might have gotten sick months or years later, and nobody would have connected it to the thrinoxine. The genocide would have continued. Millions more would have died. But I spoke up. And you listened. And together we started something that grew beyond anything we could have imagined." Marcus nodded. "That is the power of individual choice. We like to think that history is shaped by great leaders and powerful nations, but really it is shaped by ordinary people making brave choices in difficult moments. You were an ordinary girl who did an extraordinary thing, and the galaxy is better for it." Sophie leaned against him. "I am glad you were there that day. I'm glad you stopped and listened instead of walking away." Marcus smiled. "I am glad you were brave enough to warn me. We saved each other, Sophie. You saved my life. I gave you a home and a future. But more than that, we saved each other from loneliness, from the feeling that we were alone in the fight. We became family, and that made us strong enough to change the galaxy." Sophie felt warmth spread through her chest. Family. That was what the coalition was really about. Not politics or economics, but the idea that different beings could come together and care for each other like family, could protect each other and support each other and help each other grow. That was what made humans special. Their ability to expand their circle of care beyond their own species. To see aliens not as threats but as potential friends and allies. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Sophie pointed to one particularly bright star. "That is where Mom is buried, on a small moon orbiting a gas giant in that system." Marcus looked at the star. "Do you want to visit?" Sophie shook her head. "Not yet. Maybe someday. But right now I think the best way to honor her is to keep working, to keep building the kind of galaxy she believed in. She gave her life for the truth. I want to give mine for making sure that truth leads to something better." Marcus squeezed her shoulder. "You already are. Every day you work toward a more just and peaceful galaxy. Every time you speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Every time you choose understanding over hatred. You are honoring her memory." They stood up and walked back inside. The coalition building was still busy even at this late hour. Diplomats hurried between meetings. Translators worked on documents.